Will.
Yep, it's live.
Okay, it's live. We're live.
Great.
So I'm Radesh. I'm 24 years old. I'm right now studying architecture, which has nothing to do with programming. I've been learning programming because I really enjoyed it and I liked it. And a friend of mine in college showed me how to program in HTML and CSS. So from there, I started looking at PHP and JavaScript. And right now, I've been working with PHP. I really enjoy more the Node JavaScript community rather than the PHP. It's just a personal opinion. Anyone can program in whatever they like. I've been liking it more because you can do front end and back end with the same language, and it's not so much of a difference. So we have here with us Bram, which is the guy that did this really great repo on Loopback and Angular administration. I really recommend him. Go check out his repos, his GitHub channel. You will see a lot of really great stuff on it. And with us we have Pulkit. He is a developer in what language?
Sure. Hi, I'm doing a startup right now, and primarily I'm a Java developer, but kind of just wanted to learn about the Node stack, so jumped in head first and explored all the options. The reason I ended up on Loopback is I'm trying to migrate away from other hosted mobile backend as a service providers. I'll not say the name of the one I'm right now on because that would somehow get us in trouble, I imagine. So I'm on a hosted provider, and I'd like to get away from them because features don't get added fast enough or concerns don't get addressed. And with Loopback, at least there's a community to fall back on and open source to kind of hand to some of your fellow developers and ask, hey, how do we do this? So the openness really helps, and the service level agreement, can be as good as the servers you're willing to spin up on AWS. So that's why I'm looking at Loopback. I do have other Java alternatives in mind as MBAS, but not until I exhaust my research on Loopback. So I'm fingers crossed Loopback is going to be the thing that I stick with.
Cool. And we have with us Bram, which...
Yeah, I can introduce a little. I'm indeed the creator of the project mentioned by Rares, and thanks a lot for your feedback and the positive opinion on it. I've been developing for the university here in the Netherlands for the last 6 years, and came from a PHP background and did also some Java, Bash, did a little bit with Golang, and now started using JavaScript. And I really love the fact, as Rara said, that you don't have to make the context switch if you're working between the backend and the front end. You can share libraries, and I just have the feeling it's really lightweight, and I think it's a really elegant way to approach software development. So that's why I started hacking around with it, and actually I was looking for a mobile backend as a service as well, and I didn't find one that fit my needs. So it needed to be easily extendable, needed to be flexible, and actually lightweight. And the most solutions that I found were or too closed, so not extendable or not open source, or the code was messy or not to my standards. So I decided to work on it myself, and it actually became quite popular on GitHub. Today it reached the 200 stars, I think. So that's quite cool. And it even got me a new job. So this company called Fullcube, I will start working for them in like 1.5 months, and it's because they found my project and they reached out to me because they wanted a full stack Node.js developer, AngularJS. So I'm really happy about that, and it's really cool to see how far the open source community can get you, and really motivates me working on it more and more and open sourcing more stuff.
Cool, that's very, very cool. And
Yeah.
I have to say, if you haven't checked his repo, go ahead, check it out. It's a really great way to learn about the Node and about Loopback. And we can start talking about user management, I mean the part 2, or whatever you guys want. I'm here just to put the questions that maybe the community will ask.
Yeah, so what I saw from your video, I checked, I think, the first 15 minutes, and then I got in another call. You're really talking about structuring the project. Maybe you can give a 1-minute summary of what the part 1 contained. So
it contained how to extend the users model. You can see it on Pulkit's screen. It contained the users model, the how to not have on your routes the user's URL, how to use the access tokens, and how to get to know the node module itself, the loopback node module. I don't know if Pulkit wants to add something else.
Sure. So I think Raresh covered it pretty thoroughly, and we did a few Git hacks. And when I say Git hacks, I mean I'm a Java developer, I'm a JavaScript developer, I'm a Node.js developer, but that doesn't mean I know how to use GitHub to its full capacity. So we talked about how we could quickly search other people's code on GitHub to gain clues, right? We know that we want to work with roles. And so what we did this little coverage where we said, okay, let's go on GitHub and try to search Loopback Angular admin project for roles. And let's try to find a bite-sized commit that shows us that how somebody would tie the roles and expose them so you could hide parts of your UI based on that. And so, we did this hack where we searched for roles with a user colon, beamin, and we found a commit, and we drilled into the commit, and we saw okay, 11 lines. That's all it takes, done, right? So if you have question and answer for the community, you should also be able to solve that by searching on GitHub. So that was one of the topics. It was a little off topic, but it was talking about how to search source code looking for what you want.
Cool. So it's not just about the code, but also a way how to gain knowledge on your own. Yeah.
Yeah. Because Loopback is it's well documented, but then again, we're coming at it from so many angles. We need all the tools we can get.
Yeah, I agree with that. The documentation is great, but it takes some. You really have to play around with it and look at other projects to see how it works.
One question, I don't mean to interrupt. I currently am recording my screen just in case YouTube doesn't record the event. So if any of you can watch out for the YouTube event and see if there are some questions on the community, and at the people, the spectators that are online, maybe they have some questions and I won't be able to see them.
I'll check the YouTube channel on my second screen.
Okay, cool. In case YouTube doesn't record the event, so if any of you can watch out for the YouTube event and see if there are some questions on the community. I think you should
and at the people
take the volume off
that are online. Maybe they have some questions and I won't be able to see
the volume off of the YouTube event because it was playing over the event. Cool. Bram, I don't hear you.
I guess it should be better here as well now. The volume being muted.
Cool, so where can we start?
I had one thing. So let's just make a list of things we think are useful to cover. One of the things I was, one thing we could do is we could just go through the last, in the reverse order, we could go through questions on the Gitter channel that probably never get answered, or they have been answered, but the question is, you have to scroll up one page up to see the question, one page down to see the answer, right? And it's not being documented anywhere. So one thing for the later events we can do is just rehash the question and answers that were given on Gitter so somebody can just go and watch them on video. That's the idea for the future. For now, I had this thing that was very important to me, and I've seen it come up in the channel a lot, which is about remote methods. And in remote methods, people often want to know that if somebody's logged in, right, basically they did a login method and they have access token. If they call a remote method, how do you just by default know who that user is, right? How does the remote method work in context of the logged in user? And that question comes up a lot, both on Google Groups and Gitter. So we could point people to where the documentation is. We could point people to where some of the sample source code is. So that's one. Can you guys think of some more things that are questions you think you'd like to answer for other people that bugged you?
I know I had a question about OAuth and third-party authentication with Facebook or Google+. That should be a question we should cover if we have time. And third, maybe we should, there was earlier on Gitter this question about I have a project model, and on my model I have 2 projects and I have 3 users, an admin user who should look at the first 2 projects. The first user shouldn't have access to the second project, but on the first project he should. And basically the ACL
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I can talk about it, and so can Bram. He has that in his project as well, and I'd be happy to share some sample code on GitHub so that everybody doesn't feel like they can't get in it. I'll just use the open source stuff if that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's a really good approach, and to discuss like general questions that seem to come on by. I think it's good to record the video, but I find myself having more use of like code examples. So it might be a good idea that if we discuss something that one of us volunteers to implement it in just a simple project that just does that what we want it to do.
Right.
So I think the remote method with the incoming user is something I could pick up, like make a small authentication system and, for instance, have your user ID filled in automatically if you create a new object, so that you are the owner.
Very cool.
Cool. Because I think so many stuff that for instance, you or I or anyone else can find a solution to it, but I don't have it on the top of my head. Yep. So I have to look at it as well.
Okay, cool. So who wants to start and from where?
Do you mind if I go first, Bram? Okay, all right. I see you nodding. Nodding.
Not at all. Not at all.
So I'm just going to see if I can find. So I have this project on GitHub. I believe I wrote it only for the sake of. At that time, I was trying to figure out how to do context remote session user remote methods, and it was getting to be a bit painful to use gist or GIST, whatever it's called, however it's pronounced, to send that across. So give me just a second, and I hopefully can just point at that code if I can remember context. Docs strong loop Also, I can, hopefully this will give a little bit of visibility into my process when searching for docs about strong loop to everybody else. So just because I'm paddling a little bit, it's not a bad thing. Remote, okay, here we go. Remote methods up there, and remote methods, and remote. Here we go. So registering a remote method, remote hooks, adding logic, defining middleware, working with loopback objects, where it should be context, using current context. There we go, using current context. Okay, so documentation does exist, even if you have to know how to find it. So for example, here's some source. We can talk about this. So the question is, you have a remote method, you have it already, and you want to use the current context or the current user, right? So the documentation is, I don't know how to make the URL bar bigger, but it's there. Let me see if I can. Nope, I can't. So it's there. If you search for just the word context, it does come up. So, but in terms of a project and being able to see it, let's do that for a second, and let's find a. I think it's easy if I just search for this one word called. So if I did this word must exist somewhere. So let's just search GitHub for that current user. Okay, there you go. Perfect. Only one place. So if you want to pick up on the context, there's a few things you have to do, and this is one of them. So for those who are not aware, Warehouse is just the name of a project. It could be any root project, and when you create a template using Loopback and you run a command called slc loopback, which will create a template for you, it will always create a server folder, and it'll always have a main server.js file there. With that knowledge, what you should know is you can, there are default points, like it has boot scripts for seeding your data, etc., etc., etc. Before you seed your data with boot scripts, you can add a method like this, right? So, and you can, this is open source, like I just showed you, you can just go search for it. You can use the keyword set current user. You can try to use my user, which is shop and pal, and you'll find the code. I mean, we'll make it easier than that, but just saying you can find it on your own. So what this method does is it checks if there is an access token, because if there isn't, there's no point. If the access token is set, which, if you're using an Angular app, it will travel as a header, and it'll automatically be parsed by Loopback, so you don't have to worry too much about that. So if your user is logged in, really what you want to do is you want to find that user by ID, and you want to set them in something that's called the Loopback context, right? So they have a context object that's being shared, I imagine, and even across requests. So you want to set, well, not a, all right, I'm not going to say I know how it's shared, but the point is it should be request specific, so you can set the context and you can set the value. So this value, you're setting it. So if you set the key to be something different, you should be looking for something different. So the key is current user, and you've set the user into the Loopback context. Now, a big question I had was, you have access to Loopback, the object, and you can do lots of magical things easily, like loopback.get current context or loopback.set current context. What I felt the documentation wasn't very clear about was how to do this in the model classes. So let's jump over there. At least I had difficulty with it. Again, the structure is server, client, and common. That's just very basic. So if you go inside common, and let's look at the model I probably messed. And this probably will help answer the user access control question too, because you know how people have projects that they don't want each other to see? I have stored configurations that only somebody should be able to see, but not the other person. So we can answer that in a short time too. So let's just go into the JS. So, okay, so I wrote a method, right? So I have a model called store config model. In that, I have somewhere a remote call. Let me find. I have a bunch of remote methods, right?
Pulkit, could you zoom in like
sure.
two or three steps? Yeah, thanks. It's better now, thanks.
Is this much okay? Okay. So I have a bunch of remote methods, and all of these remote methods, something clever, and this again is actually a third point. People often, I had the question, I don't want to write ACLs specific to my remote methods. So I like to tie my remote methods into the ID of my model into the path ID of that model. So if I have access to that model object, that row of data, then technically I can also call this method on that row of data, which makes sense, right? Because maybe I'm not allowed to call this method on that row of data. So this kind of path cleverly ties in your remote method to that piece of data. I can come back to this if this is really a big question. But long story short, remote method already exists. And at the beginning of any remote method, like this one is something that I exposed, I kind of black box the get current user model stuff. So let's just go look at that method, because our big story was how do we get that in model class, model.js, right? Mine is store config.js. You can have any model.js do this. So looking at get current user model, the first step was enabling it on the server side, server.js. The second step is something like this. You can choose to move this outside of a single model, because a lot of models might want to use this kind of code. So you can always make the code better. Now, the biggest trick was people told me, go get loopback current context. And my question was, how do I get at the loopback object? Where is that object? How is it injected? And because what you usually see is line number 4, the model is injected. So I had questions like, what do I have to do? Model.loopback.getCurrentContext? That just confused the heck out of me. And the answer was apparently really simple. You can be outside and you can just initialize it, right? But when you're new, you don't make that connection. So the idea is, here's line number 1. It's not injected in the initialize or the export method, so don't look for it there. Just do this, and once you have done that, then it's simple. You get the context. You make sure there's a current user. Again, this key was set by us in the server side. And if there is a current user, then go ahead and do what you want, right? This, I'll talk about it in a second. So what I do is the current user is something that works on callbacks, right? And it's OK to keep using callbacks. But for people who understand how to use promises, you can promisify. You can take a callback object and make it promise capable. I happen to be using a library called Bluebird. You can use anything that you want. There are other libraries like Q that are quite popular. Anyway, all it does, it's still returning current user. It's just making it so that you can use promises with it. If you don't understand this, that's fine. We can talk about it in another session. Just ping us. We'll talk about it. And of course, since I'm tying it to a piece of data, if you don't have current user and this was called, I should probably tell you that you're unauthorized and you don't belong here. So I have this. You can mold this however you like. This source code is available on GitHub. And you know what? If we can figure out a public place to post it after the session, we'll do that.
Looking good. I have 2 comments. One is that, as far as I know, Loopback is working on building in promises, like in the core project.
Right.
So there's an issue open for it in GitHub. So they're really working on it, and I think using Bluebird, like the same way you did, is mentioned there as well.
Right.
Second thing that I like to note is that I have experimented with creating my own application model. I called it application model. You can call it core model or whatever.
Okay.
The new model I created is an extension of the persisted model, and I add there generic stuff that I'd like to reuse in other models as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. Is it one word?
I have to look up if I put it on GitHub. I did some experiments with it, but I'm not sure if I already posted it. I should post it anyway afterwards.
Okay, that's fine.
Because it's app-model.
Okay, let me find it. I don't know if they allow special keywords, but let me search.
Having the generic model is something that helped me. For instance, let's see if that's it. Server boot model instance. Well, no, this is something generic.
Yeah, that's okay. But it's good to know that that's the right approach. Having basically extending persisted model. For other people who don't know about persisted model, basically there are a bunch of built-in models that Loopback gives you. One of them is persisted model. Obviously, you can guess it means any model that can be saved is persisted model. Some of Loopback's built-in models also extend persisted model. Why? Because they would like to save themselves. Similarly, what Bram is suggesting is let's use persisted model and keep expanding upon it to add generic stuff like what you saw me use, which didn't belong necessarily copy-pasted in every single place. So
exactly. The reason that I created it in the first place was because I'd like to have timestamp on each object that gets saved on when it's created and when it's modified. So at first I created methods in every model that did the same stuff, and you copy-paste over every code, and then you think a better approach would be to have the generic. And I think it would be a good place to store stuff like this.
Okay. And you know what? What we can do is I can send, if you can introduce me to that code, I can send a pull request into your admin project. Just enhance your admin project a bit to use the application model you're talking about, and I'll throw this as a utility method. We don't have to use it right now, but I think that'll display to people what they can do if they wanted to.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Okay, another question that maybe users online have is what's the difference between a persisted model and a normal model? Because you have that option on Loopback. I know because I had the first question about it. When you create a project and you create a model, a normal model, it says would you like to extend the persisted model or the normal model? And I don't know if someone can answer that.
I have an opinion. I mean, I'm sure Bram does too. My opinion is if you don't want to save the things you're about to work on, use model. But I can hardly imagine that to be the case. So unless it's, I mean, I just can't imagine a good reason that I would ever use model, honestly. I would probably always use persisted model. I think that model and persisted model exist only so that you can have a separation of concerns. So if something is so generic that it should go in the model file, they put it in the model file. Probably persisted model already extends model. I don't know if I'm right or wrong about that, but Bram, can you take it from here?
Yeah, I didn't look at the models, but what I did see in your previous video is that you pointed out how you can open like the node modules directory and check in Loopback how stuff is implemented. I think the persisted model is in Loopback data source juggler, if that's on your project. So that's one of the things I really like about Node.js in general and the Loopback project. But what took me quite a lot of time, it's all JavaScript. And if you can read the front end, if you can write the front end, or if you can write the back end, you should be able to at least comprehend what's happening inside Loopback. Because this code, it's high quality, it's well documented, but it shouldn't scare you away. So I think this approach is really good, and it's really good to point out to people, don't be afraid to look in the node modules to see how stuff is implemented and what you can learn from that. To answer your questions, Raras, I'm not sure what the difference is between those two. I never needed the difference. I always went with persistent model. For one exception, when I wanted to extend my user, I extended the user object.
I know.
I hope that clears it up a little bit.
Right. Okay. There's a chain, basically. A user itself extends persisted model, so it already has the benefit of, all the things persisted model have. So why would you, like Bram said, if you're working on a user, extend the user model, don't extend the persisted model. So so here, let's do an exploration right now. It won't take more than a minute. I've opened up persisted model, which is under. Hopefully you can see my screen. It's under. Sorry, give me a second. There you go, persistent model. You can see that it's under node modules, wherever it is. And if you look at the methods, I've collapsed everything. What does persistent model have, right? What's its importance? It's simple. It has things like remoting, changes, checkpoints. It has reload, update attributes. That might be useful. So if you want methods like update attributes, save, count, destroy, find or create, upsert, then it would be useful. Let's look at model collapsed. Model seems to be based just for remoting, really. If you just look at the high-level method names, it just doesn't seem like something you would use for persistence. So I think that pretty much settles it. Of course, we can have the experts jump in one day. But if somebody from Strong Loop sees this and they're like, you guys are so wrong, they can jump in and correct this. But yeah, go with persisted model unless there's. Let me give you a really good example why I'm saying unless there's something better available, right? Let's just look at that for a second. I'm gonna go look at, for example, user.json. Okay. Right. What other useful thing there is? Well, there's application.json. Why is this useful? Well, I feel this application class is really useful if you're going to have keys. Sometimes you have a REST API exposed, and you want, so I don't know if people know about parse.com, but it's a hosted MBAS, and it has a concept of master key, REST key, and JavaScript key. Point is, other than username, password, if a program is going to access your program, you need tokens.
I really didn't get that.
Right. So they have this concept of, Loopback has the same concept, master key, client key, whatever, So this is not used a lot because when I was asking questions about it, there weren't a lot of people that were answering them. So I'm thinking not a lot of people use it. But if you have worker threads or Loopback workers that you need to run on a system like Iron, right, which is a queuing system and a worker system, iron.io, then you can do something like set up an application and use this, and then you won't extend persisted model. If you really wanted to change something, you would extend application. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I've seen this application model since I've started from working with Loopback, and I was kind of curious what it did. I think it also serves to implement an OAuth handler in Loopback. And if you look at the Loopback gateway, you can see how it's implemented that way. So I'm not sure if you guys saw the Loopback gateway project. I'll put it in the...
Yeah, personally, I'm waiting to try it out because I'm using Apogee proxy, so apogee.com, and they do a really good job. But as good as they are, I would like to explore if they can, I use apogee.com because if we're making a client-side project, there'll be times you need to insert tokens or username passwords to your backend calls. And you can't secure them if you put them on the client side, so a proxy has to do that. Now, a proxy can be something like Apogee, or the proxy can be something like, a component, gateway component that's provided by Strong Loop. So it's on my list of things to do to check out their gateway. According to what I understand, adding the ability to take a request on the fly and add authorization headers or something security related like that is not on the gateway roadmap right now. Can you tell me about that, Bram? Maybe, maybe not.
As far as I see how it's implemented, but I didn't check more than 1 hour into it yesterday night, is that the Loopback Gateway project is just an implementation of the Loopback API that we all know and love, and it's been enhanced with Express middleware. So, for instance, the proxy that's implemented is a piece of middleware. It's just a JavaScript and NPM object, or package, I must say, that is implemented and configured to proxy out all the API calls to another server. That's the whole core of the proxy, of course. But then again, it uses Loopback's own user authentication. So you wrap your existing API inside the new API that the gateway gives you. So, not sure if it answers your question, but the thing is, it's just a Loopback API, and it has implemented some other projects. So if you go into the server directory and you go into the middleware there, you see some of the packages that are implemented, built in. So you have the proxy, you have HTTP redirect, you have rate limiting. That's stuff you all want from an API gateway. And I think it's the boot package, but I'm not sure. Now it's in the server/server.js. You can see, for instance, how the HTTPS port redirect is done. You can see how OAuth is integrated. So basically, it's nothing more than just the API we know, which to me feels like, okay, if you want to use this in your own project without having the separate gateway in front of it, you can just take this code and implement it as you should with other functionality.
Thanks. That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have time to cover? I mean, I may have to step out in a little bit, but should we start talking about OAuth and then access control?
Yeah, good.
So this is Pulkit. I know nothing about OAuth. Anybody else on the panel who wants to take it, please go ahead.
I don't know that much about implementing OAuth. I've been using it as a consumer, and I assume that you both have experience with that as well, like connecting a Facebook application to a website, or I have been using OAuth to get a stream of tweets out of Twitter, but that's just the client side of the setup. I never really implemented it that way, so I'm not sure if I can be helpful.
If you can share with us just the client side, because I mean the people who are starting, I don't know if they want to do themselves an OAuth service. I mean, they should probably go to people from Strong Loop and Loopback to ask them, but an OAuth as a client should be really, really helpful right now.
What I can do is demonstrate on how it's implemented in the Loopback Angular admin project, if that's helpful.
Yes, I think we're just asking to see like a high-level integration, so that they're docs, and then there's just seeing somebody do the integration, saying A, B, C, D. That's I think all we're really talking about.
Yeah. So
Okay.
you can do a demonstration or an explanation on how did you use it.
Okay, let me see on how I share my screen.
It should be the second thing on the leftmost menu.
Let's see which screen I'm sharing then. So I'm not sure if we can put on my screen on the YouTube channel. Raris, is this maybe something that you can select which screen is sent to the YouTube channel? Because
no, I can't. I just, whoever talks, I think it's the one who will.
Can you try?
Who
Okay,
will
because
be on YouTube.
let's see if this helps.
Right now, the only thing I could do was select you, so I did select you.
Yeah, what I had to do, I had to basically remove all the windows from one of my screens in order to make sure that only the windows I wanted to share would be on one of those screens. So I had to clean up a little bit because I had windows all over.
Yeah, I'm on two screens as well, so I have the same issue here, but I'll try and see if that's working. Stop sharing this one. Let's see. So it looks like my screen is being shared, but I'm not sure if you can see it.
We do.
You can see it right now.
Yes.
Okay, but I don't see it on the YouTube channel as of now.
Because it goes with delay, a certain delay. So don't worry, it will appear.
Cool. To put a small disclaimer here, I didn't implement the passport myself. It has been there was a pull request by this Brazilian guy named Movibe. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but this guy has helped quite a lot with the project. A couple of months ago, he had some pull requests and some issues, and you can see here 16 pull requests. A lot of stuff didn't get in quite as well, but one of the things that got in was the passport integration. And I'm not sure if this is the one. Or this is the one. Yeah, so here he did a fix. Basically what it boils down to, StrongLoop offers plugin that handles passport authentication. And they, of course, provide an example project in which you can see how to implement it. Basically, to get an overview of what OAuth does, it handles over the authentication to a third-party provider. It can be Facebook, it can be Twitter, it can be Github, or any other provider that offers OAuth. What your application then needs to do is ask the remote provider about validating the user, and if the remote provider says, yeah, this is a valid user, you get back some sort of user object. Most of the time it's implemented by an email address. The first thing that you need to do and set up, or the most obvious part, is you have to have some integration with the providers that you want to use. So in here you see a placeholder for a Facebook login, a Google login, and a Twitter login. If we focus on the Facebook part, you see there's two blanks that need to be filled out. This way, the application that you're logging into can determine which Facebook application needs to be authenticated against. If you look at this page, in here you can see that there are some applications, and this is one of the things I use for my localhost projects. So you have an application idea, which goes here, and you have an application secret, which of course is secret, so you can see it right away without entering your password. And there's this thing called callback URL of the site URL, and based on this site URL, it determines.
That's really cool. I never knew you could give a space delimited list. That's really useful information.
Yeah, I found it out as well, as I needed the second one because the grunt reload was on the port 9000 and the API is on this port, so you want to use both. In the production, this will of course be the production domains. But basically you need those two keys, the key and the secret. You add it to here, and then the passport part, the passport plugin knows enough on how to read this data. In this specific example, you see there's a Facebook-login and a Facebook-link, which both serve a different function, and that is the Facebook login is for the initial login. So if you come to the page and you register a new user, you decide to use your Facebook, it uses this information. StrongLoop also has the option to link an existing account, which will use this information. You need a different client ID and a different secret because the callback URLs are different. So I never really understood why this should be different. But if you look at the Facebook link and the Facebook login, you see that one calls back to the auth Facebook callback, and the other one calls back to the link Facebook callback. So that's the reason that you need two applications. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this project. I really liked it. I've played around with it quite a lot. It's a very good starter project. It's not based on AngularJS, it's not based on Loopback, but it's really good way to see how you can build up a project. And one of the things I tend to use for this project is this list, obtaining the API keys, because it just puts down on a step-by-step level on how to create your app ID and how to create your secrets. So if you want to implement one of these authentication methods, go find Sahad's Hackathon Starter project, which is really popular, and you can add this stuff or follow these steps and fill in the blanks like callback URL, and then save your keys to this one file. That's the configuration of your passport. So if we look at my project, you see there's the template file. What you also see is that I've put the provider.json in the git ignore, so if you copy it for local development, it won't mess up your Git repository. Put the code there. How it's implemented. In the boot directory, you can just create your own arbitrary scripts. They will be executed in order of alphabet, if I'm correct. Some of them can be blocking, some of them can be non-blocking. That's all documented. But here's some of the stuff that needs to be done to get the passport part running. So apparently we need a body parser to get back to support JSON encoded bodies. And here's the thing that Pulkit also mentioned on how to get access to the loopback object. This is what you need to do for that. Probably would be better to implement it right here, but that might be another interesting discussion. What it does, it makes use of the Express middleware to initialize the body parser and to configure it right here. It implements the loopback tokens right here. Says some more sessions. This is all documented, so I won't go into it in detail, but what it basically just does is it adds functionality to the Express package, where Loopback is based on.
Can you explain the access token part? The line 60 through 18?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what this function does, but what I do see is that in here we pass in the model object, which we want to use as an access token object. So what this basically means is you can have different models that serve as the function for an access token, and this one is the one that's provided by Loopback. So it's one of those things that I just accept as is, and as long as I don't need to turn at it, or as long as I don't need to adjust it, I'm just fine with using it. I have to look up what this specific function means. I'm not sure why it's there.
Okay, cool.
So what it then does right here, starts with an empty config. It tries to open the provider.json. While it's not there, it will just pass out an error, pass an informational error message, like please configure your passport strategy, and it tells you how to do it basically. Up till here, it's all like in the example that Loopback provides. In the example, the application fails when there's no providers.json, and that's something I wouldn't like. I like to have the project running as simple as it can be, or as advanced as it can be. So that's why I decided to do a try-catch for the require, and later on determine, like, okay, if we have a configuration, let's set it up. Most of the part of this configuration is, again, default and strong loop provided in the example project. There's one change that I made here, and for that change I introduced an object called auth provider, because what I wanted to do is make the login screen more intelligent in the aspect that you don't have to hard code the Facebook button or the Google or Twitter login button in it. It should automatically determine. So if the developer decides it wants to integrate Facebook, the login screen should just know. You shouldn't have to put any manual action in it. For that to arrange, I made an auth provider model, and that auth provider is just an API endpoint that is provided, which will list all of the authentication providers that are configured in your providers.json. I hope it's a bit clear what I'm trying to explain. If we look,
you set up enumerations, correct?
Not sure if that's an enumeration, but so this is the config object, which is actually just the provider.json.
Right.
So if we look at that,
you exposed what's configured.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this: who needed to see the fact that these things are configured? How did it become smarter as a result of easily being able to list the configured choices via an endpoint? Could you just talk about that?
Yeah, good question. It's exactly the reason that I did this in the first place. So if we look at the users module in the front end, and we look at the login screen, for instance. So what is done here? Here we're actually looking at the screen. These are the automatic fields like username and password, and then you have this sign in button, which takes you to the sign in, and you have the register button. How it was implemented by Movibe, need to ask his name once, is he just put in like 3 buttons: Facebook, Twitter, Google. But the thing is, if you don't use one of these options, the button is still there and it won't work. It's something I don't really like. So I thought of a way of putting in these buttons automatically. So before those buttons to show up, you need to know which authentication providers are there, in which you can then loop over. So this object needed to be filled. For that, we of course look into our controller, and we look at the login controller. And the login controller here injects the authentication provider, and it starts to count them. If it found more than one, if it found more than 0 authentication providers, it will find them and it will add them to the list, which is available in the view. So to put it all in perspective, the server boots up. If it reads the configuration, it starts parsing the configuration right here. This stuff, passport configuration, is verbatim copy of what the example houses. What I do here is different. I loop through all the items in the configuration, which is just a JSON object. I get access to one of those providers, which is one of the entries in this file, for instance, the Facebook login. So this is equal to C right here. So as long as we're not on the local project, because for local authentication we don't need anything with OAuth, we find out what provider we use and we give it a class. This is just for like displaying the right icon or the right color. We create an entry with information that we like to know on the front end, and we add that entry to the auth provider API. So what this basically means is that if we have a server that is starting up, I can see if I can demo it right away. So if I create my provider.json just as we should, and we start the server, should now read the passport options and configure it. And this will also give me a list of auth providers, and it will pass around this object. So this then gets read by the login screen, and it should show me some more buttons than what the normal login. Here you can see how the buttons are added without touching the login screen. So it's totally dynamic. If I then added providers.json, and if I, for instance, remove the Google and the Twitter login, and I restart the server, and you'll see that it only saves you the Facebook login button. So this is the reason I created it dynamically, and this is the way I integrated the Loopback passport plugin. Does it make any sense? Are there any questions so far?
Hi, this is Pulkit. I think it makes a lot of sense. And no, I don't have any questions remaining. I think you just... Perfect. Thank you.
Just one small question. How did you expose that model?
Yeah. So I thought about how I would best do this, and I thought the best approach would be to use as many default functionality of Loopback that is there. So what I basically just did was, and I love this method a lot, the SLC, and then use the Loopback model. This is the function I used, and then I created a new model called auth providers, which is like any other model. It's first named here in model config, like this. And there it's just like any other object that you want to share. So we have events, we have categories, products, which are all domain-specific entities in this project. And we have one, it's called auth provider. It's just...
Did you disable the post method for public, or how did you do that?
I'm afraid I did not. I'm afraid this is something that could be hacked quite easily. And it's indeed, as you start saying it right now, it's quite dangerous, because this definitely should have an ACL that forbids everything except for reading. So in a production project, this would be in a hole. I'll make a note for myself too.
Okay, so we should see in the further weeks a change there where you can, where you will disable the methods and the public methods, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And that's one of the things that I need to do in the project more. I need to specify my ACLs, because right now it's all open. And as much as I like sharing, I don't think it's a good behavior to have these systems open.
One other question that maybe, well, it doesn't have to do with users or ACL, but more with how to clean up the Explorer, because you have a lot of methods there. Maybe you don't use head or so on and so forth. How can you disable those methods and clean up the Explorer? Because right now you have a lot of methods on methods and on methods, and you maybe want to just get rid of one or two.
So are you talking about removing entities of this page? Like, for instance, if you don't need events, you want to share it or hide it?
Oh, no, I mean, like, you try going to auth providers right now, and you have their method auth providers ID with the head method.
Yeah.
So I will want to just shut that down, because I won't be using head. I don't know, just for an example. Is there a way to disable that? That's
It's not that I'm aware of directly. Pulkit, I'm not sure if you can answer this.
I think we can look for something creative. There may be something like in the ACLs, there may be a way to deny this. Because here's the thing, right? Like one way I can think of shutting it down is by read and write, right? If you shut down anything, you say deny everybody everything, then right away a lot of these methods disappear in the ACL. Then you have the option of read and write. And if you say read, then get and head should be the only two left, right? But to control it via read or write controls batches of these things. It doesn't control individual ones. Although I do know there is way to control individual method names. So it's kind of funny. I know they have ACLs and they'll let you control which method you can access explicitly or not. And I know they have read and write, which will let you, turn on all the read gets or all the puts and posts. But I've never thought about turning off post or get endpoint specifically. It may be worth asking on Gitter, or maybe worth exploring the strong loop documentation. But right now, I don't have an answer.
It's because I know Rich from the strong loop team did have a way. I don't remember if it was Rich or some other fellow from strong loop that had a way to disable that. I don't know.
I think it's a good way to approach it using the ACL, and it should be intelligent enough. But as Pulkit said, I only know about disabling permissions and not methods. Now those two are quite integrated quite closely, because if you have a REST API, you post or you put for a new instance, you do a get for retrieving, a head for counting or checking existence. So that's all quite statically defined, I think. For instance, one of my questions was, I wanted to control in the API, in the backend, I want to control the ability for creating new users. Because as it is out of the box, you can just push a user object to your user's endpoint and it will be created. And I was thinking about hacking it in the users.js, while the actual answer just boiled down to disable it in the API, and then you have it disabled, which was kind of a mind shift for me. I had to shift between that and writing my own custom code to do that. I think it's the preferred way to use the ACL. I think it's a neat way to do it that way.
Okay. I remember Rich having, I think it's Rich, I don't recall right now. He had a way to disable a method on the Explorer. We should, I think I will look around and maybe on the next event I will just see if I can share it with you guys.
Cool.
All right, sweet. If that covers OAuth, we have two more things. I mean, I'm actually running out of time, but let me just say it. There are two more things we could try to cover. One is, of course, access control. I could try to go over that really quickly. Hopefully my son doesn't wake up. And another thing on my wish list was I want to bring people's attention to the remoting part of strong loop. So it's a little bit odd to think of strong loop loopback remoting or any kind of remoting, but when you want to write this, like in Angular, you'll notice the code you write for Angular, the syntax is just slightly different than the code you write in server.js or model.js, right? And that bugs me personally, because there's, maybe you have to put where, maybe you don't have to put where, that keyword, and it messes me up a lot. And when I started writing workers, I was asking them for a JSON, for a Node.js client that would mimic, basically I didn't want to write syntax that was different from how I would write it on server.js or model.js. And for the longest time I had this thread going on forums where I was trying to write a Node.js client that looked at this file that you see in front of you, the Explorer file that Bram is sharing. Okay, now he's not sharing anymore. And it looked at that and it said, okay, let me try to, from this, extrapolate RESTful calls, right? That was a lot of work on my part, and it was, I would say, very wasted effort. What I found in the end is they have this strong loop remoting, which is pretty much like saying it's their Node.js client, right? They have this thing, all the syntax of what you will write on the client side. Let's say you have a worker. You don't want to run the server folder, but you do want to run the files in the common folder, and you do have a client that does something like every so often it logs in as a user and does some work on their behalf, like runs a report that's supposed to be ready for them when they log in on Monday, right? So for that kind of work, the application thing that I showed is useful, right? Because if I'm logging in, you can either log in on behalf of a user, but then you need to know their username password, or you need to have been assigned an extra access token, which may expire, or you can use the application model and use the RESTful key and always log in as a master because you're a worker. So that's where this was useful. And right now I'm actually working on using the strong remoting API. Let me share my screen if I can.
Yeah, I'm really curious on how this works, and it's been interesting in the project for a while because I believe you can also use it for storing data locally.
Yes, so that's why they call it remoting. They're trying to use a sexier name, but for me it's a much simpler question of having a Node.js client.
Yeah, I've implemented one of those with, I think, the request library to just do a login and automate my testing.
Okay.
But I'm happy to see if there's a more official way to approach it.
Okay. Yeah, so I just want to get more eyeballs on strong remoting because I think it's an important point to write code only once and be able to move it between server and client. And so here's the strong loop strong remoting URL. Hopefully you can all see that. Having said that, the README serves. There are many use cases, right? Like the one you just talked about, Bram. And the README covers, I think, a couple of use cases. But which use case did you want to talk about? I'm not sure if that's covered by the README.
What I like to do is, for instance, if I implement an ACL, I'm testing over and over again if I get the functionality that I want. Mm-hmm. And being a developer means I'm lazy and I don't want to do it by hand, logging in all the time to my front end. So what I like is more like a scripted implementation of what I want to test.
Okay. For that, there's actually, yes, I can see how you would want to use strong remoting for that, but there may be even a better option. One of the things I at some point need to find out from the strong loop folks is how to do better testing. Recently, I wrote a connector for them, not for them, for myself, for Elasticsearch, right? Because they have connectors for Mongo, and I kind of copied somebody's and tried to do it for Elasticsearch. At that time, at least I learned how to test the connectors. And what you're talking about is more end-to-end testing, right? So one of my Elasticsearch connector right now is at version 0.3. The reason it's not 1.0 yet is because login, logout don't work. So, I'm also looking in Loopback for ways, because they're obviously testing it somewhere. They use something called super test. Let me see. So this is, I thought I'd answer your question first before we did remoting. If you search for super test, maybe you can make heads and tails of it better than I could. Actually, that's just something. Okay, so. Okay, come on. Here. So this is Loopback Explorer. So here's a test in Loopback Explorer where they're using something called super test, and it's supposed to do things like make this request and make that request and make that leave. You see this here. Basically, what you're looking for. So if you're looking for the official way for testing them more easily, they've recommended looking at super test and looking at their code. Honestly, I haven't been able to decipher their code because I don't know how to get this test set up for myself. I can read the test, I can mimic the test, but when it comes to starting the test in my project and bootstrapping that whole framework, I'm clueless. So, hopefully one day I'll figure it out.
Cool. I'll look into this because it's actually what I want.
Yeah, I saw you have Karma enabled, and you probably want a little bit more than Karma in the admin portal. I would like to contribute if I could understand it. So back to strong remoting, which, like you said, may be an option for testing. I think that's a valid point. Yeah, so here it is. I encourage people to look at it simply because you have server-side code today, but if you ever need to black box your server-side code, because you're running a server, right? You're running a website. long-running tasks on a website should not run in the admin portal. They should go on a queue, and they should be run by workers, right? So you need an infrastructure. The infrastructure I personally like, and people are free to choose their own, is iron.io, right? The point is I throw my Node.js code up there. So what I'm right now researching is, can I do some task on iron.io, and when that task is done, it just persists it, right? It just says user.save or report.save. What it's doing is, instead of calling my backend like Mongo or Elasticsearch, it's really calling the juggler, which is RESTful, right? So it's using a remote call to say user.save, which should work just like if I did user.save in server.js or in my boot script. It did some work for me as a worker. It did user.save. The data should flow through the juggler to whatever my backend is, right? So it's agnostic to backend. So whatever, I just like more people thinking about and looking at strong remoting. It may apply for them at some point. I can also quickly share, since I was working on it, how I just used it. Their use case doesn't really talk about Node.js right now. I don't know what they're trying to talk about, but they've got two use cases up there. The one I like to just share with the community is, if you had a worker, how would you use this, right? Something as simple as that. So here we go. So here's, I'm setting up a worker, right? So let me just talk about what I did here. Some of the shortcomings. Supposedly you just do install remoting, right? I did that. Okay, we're gonna have to save this for another time. My son woke up. I'm gonna drop off, guys. I'm sorry.
Don't worry.
Don't worry, thanks. I'm really interested in seeing how this works, but I think it's a big thing as well. So might be good to save it for the next time.
All right. Thanks.
It will be the next time.
Thanks, Pulkit.
Bye, Bram.
Bye.
So yeah, a really cool.
Yeah, thanks for taking the initiative. I like this.
We really need to have more videos, more on how to do this and that, because right now I'm starting with the Loopback. I'm really starting. I was using deployed, which Reach was part of. I want now to be able to do more stuff on my own than deployed lets me. So I am starting out with strong loop and loopback, but I'm at the beginnings.
Yeah, but you have to start somewhere, and I think the Loopback does so many things for you that you can use in a professional project. If you don't want to focus on all the details, you can just start using it, and you can dive in as deep as you want. And I think that's the beauty of the project.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to the community?
I saw on the, I'm not sure, I think on the video that I made this 10-minute mobile app demo. It's implemented there, and I'm giving this talk tomorrow at a local meetup. It will be in English, and I asked them if they can record it. So if I can get the record of it,
I will gladly put it online if you want me to.
Yeah, perfect. And we can do it on your channel to keep it all
in
there.
one place, yeah.
And for the future, I think it would be good to have more of these sessions and somewhere set time frame, like for instance, one time every 2 weeks.
Sure.
Do a session of an hour or 2 hours.
That would be great. That would be great, because I really need to learn, and if I can learn from somebody who has been doing it and has more experience than me, I will learn faster. So
cool. And as my project go, you're more than welcome to send in pull requests or to talk about what you miss on the project to see if we can implement it.
I will maybe do a tutorial these days, I don't know when, on how to use GitHub properly with forks and pull and everything. I hope I can. I'm not an expert on it either, but I will try to.
Cool. Yeah, there's only one way to learn it good, and that's just by doing. So
yeah,
that's in my experience. I want to point you out to GitFlow. I'm not sure if you know it or heard about it.
GitFlow, I did not, but I will definitely check it out.
Yeah, look at it. It's an It's a workflow they designed on how to set up some structure in your Git projects, and it's implemented by a Git plugin. So you have to install the plugin, and then your local Git knows about how to treat different branches and tagging and stuff like that. And if you find it hard to work with the command line Git, it also is the Git flow is also enabled in SourceTree, the project of Atlassian.
Yeah, I know SourceTree. I would really want to not use programs. I would want to use the terminal because it's way easier.
Yeah.
But yeah. So cool. Thanks for everything. Your repo, again, it's a major advance for the strong loopback community.
Thanks a lot.
I think it's a really good example on a good starting point of how things are getting done. Even though the documentation has it, it's way easier to understand something that's already done. So thanks a lot for that.
You're welcome. I'm glad to see that it got such nice traction, and it amazed me that so many people use it. But I get like emails every week telling me that people are happy to using it, so that's a big compliment, and it really motivates me to further develop it. And there's heaps of things that I want to see changed, but as said, I just have a new function, and I need to finish my current job. But over time, I hope the project will grow.
Sure, if we can help you, we will, as part of the community. Now I'm the voice of the community. I think anyone who wants to help you, he will. And thanks a lot.
Yeah, there's one thing, it might use another name at a certain moment. So that's something we can think about it. So I think Loopback Angular admin describes what it does, but it's not the most original name. So it might be something...
We can think of a name later on. If anyone has any suggestions, please put it on the comment section.
Exactly.
And yeah. Cool.
Great. Thanks a lot. I enjoyed the session.
I will stop now the event online and
cool.